He was still warm when I heard my son call me an old witch. Not as a joke, not in anger. Just casually. Like you'd mention the weather. It was at my husband's funeral. My Harold. We were standing by the casket, surrounded by lilies and forced grief, when Justin leaned toward his children and whispered, "Finally, he's gone. Now we just need to get rid of that old witch." He didn't know I could hear him, but I did. And something inside me, some quiet, stretched-out thread, snapped clean in half. I didn't cry. I didn't make a scene. I just stood there, both hands resting on my purse, as I'd done at a dozen funerals before. Someone offered condolences. I nodded. Someone hugged me. I allowed it. But my insides had gone silent. Not with shock. Not with sadness. Just stillness. The kind that comes before a storm. Or after one. Harold had been my anchor. Not perfect, but mine. He knew how to say nothing when nothing needed to be said, and how to hold a hand without squeezing too tight. He had a gentleness about him that never drew attention to itself. 49 years we were married, a lifetime of ordinary mornings, shared jokes, arguments, reconciliations. And in the end, it was quiet. A stroke in his sleep. Gone before the ambulance came. I remember staring at his shoes by the door that morning. They still looked ready to walk out with him. Justin is our only son. He used to be sweet, sharp, funny, curious. But something in him hardened over the years. Or maybe it softened in the wrong places. His ambition began to outgrow his kindness. And when he met Lauren, his wife, something shifted entirely. He became polished, distant, efficient, as he liked to call it. I tried not to take it personally. I cooked when they visited. I offered to babysit. I paid for camps, piano lessons, braces. I gave them the keys to our little lake house every summer. I didn't ask questions. I didn't meddle. I smiled when Lauren made comments about my clothes or corrected my stories in front of the kids. I told myself, they're busy. They're building their own life. That's what children do. But now I was that old witch. Not even worth hiding contempt for. Just a line tossed into the air, like it meant nothing. At the memorial lunch, I sat by the window in my navy coat. Justin and Lauren took a separate table with the kids and some friends. I heard him laugh. A real belly-deep laugh. He was drinking red wine. He looked relaxed. One of the grandkids, Bryce, I think, ran over and asked, "Nana, are you coming back with us or going home?" Lauren pulled him back quickly. She didn't even glance at me. Of course I was going home. Back to the house where Harold's scent still lingered in the hallway. Back to his slippers by the bed and the half-finished crossword on the kitchen table. Back to silence. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat in the armchair and stared into the dark. The clock in the kitchen ticked like it always had. And I thought, when did I stop being a mother and become a burden? When did love turn into obligation? And more importantly, how long have I let this happen? This house may not be much, but it's paid off. My savings aren't millions, but they're real. And the jewelry in the safe? Every piece has a story, and none of it, none, will go to someone who calls me a witch. I stood up. My knees complained, my back threatened to spasm. But I walked to Harold's study, opened the bottom drawer, and took out the folder. The will? I hadn't looked at it since we updated it 3 years ago. Justin's name was there. So were the kids, all neat, all tidy, all automatic. I picked up a pen, and I crossed them out. I met Harold when I was 21. He wasn't much older, 24, fresh out of medical school, still carrying around his textbooks as if he might be quizzed in the grocery store. He wasn't loud or flashy. In fact, he was a little shy. But he looked people in the eyes when he spoke, and he never made promises he couldn't keep. We married in early spring. It rained the entire morning of the wedding. Then the clouds broke just before I stepped out of the church. My veil blew sideways, and we both laughed, standing there in the wet grass. That laughter, it was the start of our life. Not fireworks, not drama, just the kind of joy that makes you feel safe. Our first apartment was above a butcher shop. The stairs creaked, the walls were thin, the heat barely worked. But I loved it. I was still working then, part-time at the library, and Harold had just started his residency. We had nothing, but it didn't feel like nothing. Later came the house. Not this one. That came after Justin was born. But the one before. The small yellow house near the park. I planted peonies along the fence and thought, naively, that life was now complete. Then came Justin. He was a beautiful baby. Big eyes, strong lungs, and a stubborn streak that showed itself before he could walk. Harold adored him. Used to press his ear to Justin's chest just to hear his heart beating. I remember once during a power outage, the two of them sat on the floor building a fort out of couch cushions and flashlight beams. I stood in the doorway and thought, this is it. This is the good stuff. It's strange, looking back now, how quietly things shift. You never see the moment the tide turns. Not when it's gradual. Not when you're too close to the shore. As Justin grew older, he changed. That's normal, of course. We all do. But some of the softness in him hardened. He began measuring things, not just in numbers, but in worth. He wanted better shoes, a faster bike, a newer watch. He never threw tantrums. He just demanded quietly. Harold didn't like that, but he didn't make much of it either. He's smart, he'd say. He'll find his way. He did find his way. He studied finance, took an internship straight out of college, wore pressed shirts, and carried his confidence like a shield. When he introduced us to Lauren, he told me she came from a different kind of family. He meant richer, of course. I could tell that by the way he watched me rearrange the table when they came for dinner. By the way he asked me not to make too much fuss. I baked a simple apple tart that night. Lauren didn't touch it. They married quickly. I offered to help, with the flowers, the planning, whatever they needed. Justin thanked me, but said it was all handled. I sat in the third row, not the first, at their ceremony. Lauren's family filled the front too, and after that, the visits slowed. The calls became scheduled. Birthdays were remembered but rarely celebrated together. And still, I kept giving. For holidays, for school clothes, for vacations. Quietly, always quietly. It felt right. What else was I supposed to do? He was my son. Even when Harold died, that day, that terrible day, I waited 4 hours before Justin showed up at the hospital. He looked shocked, even angry, as if Harold had done it on purpose, inconvenienced him somehow. He didn't even warn us, Justin said. I was still holding Harold's hand when he said it. Now I realize I made excuses. Over and over. I told myself that Lauren was difficult, but Justin was just tired. That the kids were sweet, just busy. That life was fast, and I was slow. And it wasn't personal. But it was. It had been personal for years. After I crossed out their names, I sat at Harold's desk a long time. The pen rested in my hand like it belonged there. His photo stared back at me. The one from our 40th anniversary, where he wore that ugly bow tie I hated just to make me laugh. I asked him out loud, "Is this right?" He didn't answer, of course, but the silence in the room wasn't as empty as before. I knew what I had to do next, not out of anger, out of respect, for myself, for the life we built, for the love that raised Justin, even if he no longer remembered it. The next morning, I boiled the kettle and made tea like I always do. Same cup, same steeping time, same quiet shuffle in slippers across the kitchen tiles. The only difference was inside me. Something had shifted. Not rage, not sadness. More like a quiet resolve. A door closing gently, but firmly. I sat by the window, cupping my tea, and thought of all the ways I'd made myself small over the years. The apologies I gave before being asked, the "it's no troubles," the swallowed insults, the silence I wore like a second skin. I'd done it for peace, for family, for the illusion that love still sat at the table with us, even when all it did was pull up a chair and stare at its empty plate. I hadn't told anyone what I'd done yet. The will, the crossing out. It was still mine, private and fresh. But I knew it couldn't end there. I had a lawyer. Harold and I hired him after his first heart scare 15 years ago. Marcus DeWitt. Always in wrinkled suits, always with a stain on his tie, but sharp as a tack and loyal beyond reason. I found his business card in the same drawer where we kept expired warranties and light bulbs that didn't fit anything anymore. He picked up on the second ring. "Mrs. Hemsley," he said, like I was calling from 20 years ago. "How can I help you?" "I need to update the will," I said, "and a few other things." He hesitated, just for a second, then cleared his throat. "Everything all right?" "No," I said, "but it will be." He offered to come by the house that afternoon. Said he had a gap between court and paperwork. 3 o'clock? 3 o'clock, I agreed. I spent the rest of the morning cleaning, not because the house needed it, but because I did. There's something holy about scrubbing a surface until it shines. I polished the brass lamp in the hallway, wiped the baseboards in the living room, rearranged Harold's books by genre instead of alphabet. I even dusted the top shelf, where nothing but old tax folders and Harold's model sailboat sat untouched for years. When Marcus arrived, he brought his usual coffee shop pastry, a habit from long ago, one I never had the heart to break. "Still don't like almond?" he asked, already biting into it. "Still don't," I replied, offering him a napkin anyway. We sat at the dining room table. I slid the old will toward him. "I want to revoke this," I said, "and start fresh." He read silently for a while, flipping through pages. Then he looked up at me, face unreadable. "I assume this isn't a temporary rift." "No," I said. "It's been permanent for years. I just hadn't caught up to it." He nodded slowly. "And the grandchildren?" "I want none of it going to Justin's side of the family," I said. "None." Marcus tilted his head, waiting. "But I do want to make provisions for someone," I added. "Someone who still sees me." That someone was a girl named Nora, my granddaughter, from my daughter Claire. Claire died when Nora was 12. Car crash, rainy night, drunk driver. The kind of call that doesn't feel real, even years later. Claire had been my sunshine child, fiery, kind, stubborn. And Nora. Nora was a mirror of her mother in all the ways that mattered. After Claire died, Nora was passed around. First to her father's family, who didn't want her, then briefly to Justin and Lauren, who clearly couldn't be bothered. She ended up in a foster home 3 towns over. I found out through a social worker who still had my number on file. I went straight to court and got guardianship. She lived with me until she turned 18. Now she's 25, working part-time at a bookstore and saving for grad school. Calls every Sunday, visits twice a month, brings her own groceries, wipes her shoes at the door, kisses my cheek before leaving. I never had to guess if she loved me. I want a trust in her name, I told Marcus. One that kicks in immediately. She can use it for school or life, whatever she wants. He began to scribble notes. Do you want her to know? Not yet, I said. Let's just get it done first. We spent 2 hours going over everything. The house, the savings, the insurance, the little lake cabin. I was amazed at how much I still had. How carefully Harold and I had built something, even without knowing who'd deserve it in the end. When Marcus left, I walked him to the door. He paused on the porch. You sure about this, Agatha? He asked. First time anyone had used my name all day. I nodded. I'm done rewarding cruelty. It's time to start honoring kindness. And I meant it. Every word. I used to think that distance in families came from big things. Betrayal, scandal, some irreparable wound. But now I know that most of it comes slowly, quietly, like fog creeping in under a door. You don't notice it until you can't see clearly anymore. After Justin got married, the change was gradual. He didn't slam any doors. He didn't yell. He just withdrew, a little at a time. Less phone calls. Less time at our house. Shorter visits at Christmas, then none at all. At first, I blamed work. He's got a lot on his plate. Then I blamed the kids. 3 kids is a lot to juggle. Then I blamed myself. Maybe I talk too much. Maybe I say the wrong thing. Lauren never liked me. She wouldn't say it outright. She's too polished for that. But it was in the way she spoke to me. Always slightly surprised that I was still alive. Always gently correcting me if I shared a memory out of order or mixed up a date. Actually, that was the following summer, Agatha. Remember? The way she used my name, as if I were a neighbor she had to tolerate. I stopped offering advice. I stopped offering casseroles. I stopped trying to impress her with clean silverware or remembering which child didn't eat what anymore. None of it mattered. The more I tried, the more invisible I became. Justin changed along with her. He became more efficient. That's the word he always used when we talked. Efficient. As if family were something to optimize. Our phone calls turned into quarterly updates. Hey, Mom, just checking in. Then 15 minutes of polite conversation with nothing real inside it. Then, okay, I've got to jump on a call. Jump on a call? That was always how it ended. I kept adjusting to the new normal. When they bought their house, the big one, with 5 bedrooms and a manicured lawn, I congratulated them. He said they'd need help with the down payment, just a little short of the bank's final requirement. Just a buffer, he said. I wired the money that week. He never mentioned it again. Then came the asks, always framed as temporary: piano lessons, a private school deposit, a car repair, camp fees, a kitchen remodel. Lauren's real estate business needed a website refresh. Could I help with that? Only if you're comfortable, Mom, Justin would say, already knowing I'd say yes. And I did. Every time. Because I thought that's what mothers do. You give until you're empty, and then you give a little more. And if they don't say thank you, well, maybe they're just busy. Maybe the thanks is in their happiness. Maybe love doesn't always sound the way you want it to. But over the years, I noticed things. Little things. like how my birthday became an afterthought, how no one called on the anniversary of Harold's death, how Lauren would roll her eyes when I talked too long, how the children, especially the older two, began to mirror their parents' condescension. The way they'd check their phones during dinner, the way they called me grandma like it was a formality, like I was a guest in their lives. The only one who ever really saw me was the youngest, Mia, 12 years old, bookish, still wide-eyed. She would slip me notes on scraps of paper when no one was looking. "Your cookies are the best. Don't tell Mom, but I like your perfume. I wish you lived with us." But even she was starting to pull away. I could feel it. The current in that house was strong, and I couldn't blame a child for learning how to swim with it. There was one dinner I remember clearly. 3 years ago. We were all seated around their enormous table, 12 people, enough place settings to start a restaurant. I had brought a roast chicken, homemade rolls, and the lemon bars Mia liked. No one touched the lemon bars. At one point, I mentioned something about Harold, some old joke he used to tell when Justin was a boy. The table went quiet. Lauren reached for the wine and said, "Let's not go down memory lane again, Agatha. It's been years." I stared at her, then at Justin. He didn't defend me. He didn't even look at me, just kept cutting his steak. I went home that night and sat in my car in the driveway for half an hour before going inside. I don't know why. Maybe because the silence in the car still felt warmer than what I'd just left. That was the night I realized, my son doesn't like me. He doesn't respect me. He tolerates me when I'm useful and discards me when I'm not. And the most painful part? I still kept loving him, right up to the moment he called me a witch at Harold's funeral. That's when the last fraying thread broke. That's when I stopped asking why and started preparing for what comes next. The first time I ever truly doubted Justin's intentions wasn't after a cruel word or a missed birthday or even that quiet humiliation at their dinner table. It was a spreadsheet. It came in an email. He had forwarded me something Lauren had prepared. No greeting, no explanation, just a clean, color-coded breakdown of shared family expenses. At the top, Hemsley household contributions. Under that, 3 columns labeled education, property, and lifestyle enhancements. The tone of it was sterile, clinical, the way you might present a budget proposal at a job, and at the very bottom, in bold, projected shortfall. Q3, $17,400. I remember sitting there staring at the number like it was a punchline. No, "Hi, Mom, hope you're doing well." No, "Let us know if this is too much." Just that number, and beneath it, one short line from Justin. "Let me know if you can bridge this for us. Lauren's firm is scaling up and we're stretched thin until next quarter." Bridge this. Like I was a bank or a patch of rope between cliffs. I didn't respond right away. I didn't even open my banking app, though that was usually my first instinct. Instead, I printed out the spreadsheet and stared at it for a long time. Something about holding it on paper made it feel less absurd. Or maybe more. Education, $6,000. Private school fees. Property, $8,200. New insulation, landscaping, gutter repair. Lifestyle enhancements, $3,200. Gym memberships, a family wellness retreat, and something simply labeled wine cellar cooling unit upgrade. That was the one that made me laugh, not out of humor. It was the kind of laugh that comes out because your body doesn't know what else to do with disbelief. I never replied to that email, not directly. But a week later, I transferred $10,000. It was what I could comfortably part with. I didn't include a message, I didn't get a thank you. A few months later, they invited me over for brunch. Lauren made some sort of oat crust quiche I pretended to enjoy. We sat outside, in their freshly landscaped backyard, under a trellis of new ivy. Justin complimented the new garden furniture. It was an investment, he said, watching Mia twirl in the grass. This is where we make our memories. I sipped my coffee and smiled politely. The furniture was nice, but it wasn't mine. I started keeping a folder not long after that. Just a simple accordion file in the bottom drawer of my desk. Every time I sent them money for school, home repairs, trips, medical bills, sports, I printed the confirmation and filed it. Not because I wanted it back, I never expected that, but because I needed to see it, needed to witness in black and white the life I was silently underwriting. By the time Harold passed, the folder was 3 inches thick. One day, I sat down and added it all up. Every cent. Every gift that wasn't called a gift. Every favor disguised as a family need. The number at the bottom made me go still. $182,450, not including birthday checks, not including the car I handed down, not including meals, groceries, holidays, or the mortgage help from years ago. I thought of all the ways they'd told me over the years that they were doing great. All the moments they had spoken about self-sufficiency, about boundaries, about modern parenting values. And here I was, sitting at my desk, staring at a number that represented over 4 decades of quiet, dutiful sacrifice. And still, they saw me as a burden. Still, they saw me as the witch. That word hung over me in those days. Witch. Lauren didn't say it, but I saw it in her eyes when I corrected her son's grammar, when I folded towels wrong, when I asked too many questions at dinner, old, obsolete, slightly in the way. I'm not a fool. I know how I'm seen when I enter a room now, invisible until inconvenient. But I never expected it from my own blood. Not from the boy who used to bring me dandelions. The boy who once begged me not to leave him on his first day of school. But life doesn't pause for our expectations. And love, as I've learned, can be redefined without notice. Quietly converted into obligation, then into resentment. And now here I was, sitting in a house I'd once dreamed of filling with grandchildren's laughter, holding a folder full of proof that love, at least from them, had long ago been replaced by invoices. But I wasn't bitter. Not anymore. Bitterness is a heavy coat, and I've carried enough. What I felt was clarity. And clarity, for the first time in years, felt like peace. Nora came over that Sunday, just like she always did. 2 gentle knocks, then the door opening before I could even answer. She never waited to be invited in. She knew she always was. "Morning, Grandma," she said, stepping out of the rain and shaking droplets from her coat. "I brought you something." She held up a paper bag. Inside were still warm blueberry muffins wrapped in parchment and tied with twine. Homemade, of course. Nora could bake like her mother, not fancy, but from the heart. The kitchen filled with the smell of sugar and butter, and for a moment, it almost felt like life before everything got complicated. We sat at the table, the same one Harold built 50 years ago when we were still renting our first apartment. The varnish had dulled, but it was solid, like most things that last. "How's work?" I asked, pouring tea. She sighed. "Same as always. The bookstore's quiet. Everyone's shopping online these days, but I like it there. It smells like paper and dust and old stories. It's a good smell." She broke a muffin in half and handed me a piece. And you? How are you holding up? That question, simple, sincere, and so rarely asked by anyone in my family that it nearly undid me. I'm all right, I said, getting used to the quiet again. She nodded, studying my face the way only someone who really sees you can. You look tired, she said softly, but also lighter? I smiled faintly. Maybe that's not a coincidence. She grinned. Did you finally tell Aunt Lauren what you think of her throw pillows? That made me laugh. An honest, surprised laugh. No, but I did make a decision that would probably ruin her appetite. Nora raised an eyebrow. Should I be concerned? Not at all. Relieved, maybe. I didn't tell her the details of what I'd done. Not yet. The new will, the trust, the quiet crossing out of names. She didn't need to carry that knowledge. Not now. But she must have sensed something. She always did. She looked around the room, her gaze landing on a photograph of Harold holding a much younger Justin, a toddler with a crooked smile. Grandpa looks so proud there, she said. He was, I replied. He always was. He wanted the world for your uncle. And he got it, she said quietly. Just not the way he expected. That girl sees through everything, I thought. Just like her mother did. We spent the rest of the morning talking about little things, her classes, her cat, the new neighbor who mows the lawn too close to my roses. When she laughed, it sounded like sunlight on water. It reminded me that love doesn't vanish just because it changes form. Sometimes it skips generations, landing exactly where it's needed most. When she left, she hugged me tight. That kind of hug where you can feel the heartbeat of the person you're holding. You know, she said, you're the only person I know who never pretends. It's like you live in full sentences while everyone else just uses bullet points. I didn't fully understand what she meant, but I took it as a compliment. After she left, I stood at the window watching her car disappear down the street. The rain had stopped, leaving the world scrubbed clean, the air sharp and new. I turned back toward the kitchen and saw her mug still on the table, half a muffin beside it, crumbs, tea rings, and something that looked suspiciously like hope. That afternoon, I called the bank. The woman who answered sounded young, maybe too young to understand the quiet weight of what I was doing. I'd like to make some changes to my accounts, I told her. I'll come in tomorrow morning. She confirmed my appointment and asked if I needed help preparing any documentation. Just myself, I said. That'll be enough. Then I called Marcus. I want to finalize the trust, I told him. Make it official. He said he could have the papers ready in 2 days. When I hung up, I walked around the house, touching the walls, the shelves, the small objects that held a lifetime. Harold's pipe, my sewing box, the chipped teapot from our honeymoon in Brighton. All the things that had meant home. And I realized that none of them were worth a thing to the people I had once called family. To Justin, these were just old things. Reminders of a life he'd already erased from his own story. But to Nora, every item had a heartbeat. She'd ask where they came from, who made them, what they meant. She wanted the stories, not the silver. And that, I decided, was the difference between inheritance and legacy. Inheritance is money. Legacy is meaning. One runs out. The other stays. That night, I slept better than I had in months. No sleeping pills, no restless turning. Just a deep, quiet sleep, like a garden finally watered after a long drought. In the morning, I woke to sunlight cutting across the room and thought, maybe this is what peace feels like. The last time I had dinner with Justin and his family before Harold died, was one of those evenings you don't realize will matter until much later. The kind that looks ordinary on the surface, but leaves a crack that never quite closes. It was a Sunday, late spring. The sky still pale at 7 o'clock, the air soft with the smell of cut grass. I remember because Harold had been feeling weak that week, and I almost stayed home to watch over him. But Justin called. "Mom, Lauren says you should come for dinner. We'll keep it simple." I heard the tone in his voice, not warmth, but obligation. I said yes anyway. I always did. When I arrived, Lauren greeted me at the door wearing an apron that said, "Kiss the cook," though she looked like she'd rather not be touched. The smell of something citrusy hung in the air. Her candles always smelled expensive, like a department store trying too hard. "Agatha, you made it," she said, as if I were an unexpected guest. "Shoes off, please." "The new carpet." I nodded and slipped them off, balancing against the wall like a schoolgirl who'd forgotten her manners. Justin appeared from the living room, phone in hand, not looking up right away. "Hey, Mom," he said absently. "You find the place all right?" As if I hadn't been coming there for years. Dinner was set for 6, though we were only 5 that night. The twins had gone to a school event. Mia sat beside me, coloring quietly, while Lauren moved plates like she was setting up a showroom. "I tried a new recipe," she said. "Seared tuna with sesame glaze, something light." I smiled politely. "That sounds lovely." She poured wine before anyone sat down, making sure her glass was always full first. Conversation started with small things: work, the market, the neighbor's new dog. Then Lauren started talking about renovations again. "We're thinking of expanding the kitchen," she said. "Maybe add an island. The contractor says it'll increase the house value by at least 10%. Justin nodded, chewing. "We just need to cover the initial payment before the line of credit renews." I felt their eyes turn to me before they even spoke. It was almost comical, the choreography of it. A pause, a smile, a sigh. Lauren put down her fork. "Of course we don't expect help," she said sweetly. "But if you wanted to invest in the property, it could be mutually beneficial. You'd have your name on the deed, naturally." "Invest?" I almost laughed. They made it sound so modern, so respectable, as if they weren't talking about borrowing money from their 70-year-old mother. I stirred my wine and said nothing. Mia nudged me under the table and whispered, "Don't, Grandma." She must have sensed it coming. The polite request, the careful manipulation. Children always know more than adults think they do. I looked at Justin and Lauren. "I'll think about it," I said evenly, "but I'd rather not rush into anything." Lauren's smile didn't waver, but her eyes chilled a degree. "Of course. We just thought you'd want to be part of the family home. It'll be where the kids grow up." Part of the family home. As if I hadn't built my own, brick by brick, with Harold's overtime and my thrift shop curtains. I smiled. "That's wonderful, dear. You've made a beautiful place already." Dinner carried on. No one mentioned the topic again, but the air stayed tight, like a thread stretched too far. When dessert came, a lemon tart Lauren admitted she hadn't baked herself, everyone was quiet. The only sound was the faint hum of the refrigerator and the clink of forks. Justin broke the silence. "Mom," he said, "I wanted to ask, did you ever get that financial advisor I recommended?" "I did," I lied. "He said everything's stable." "That's good," he said quickly, relief flashing across his face. He wasn't asking out of concern. He wanted to know if there was still money left. When I left that night, Mia ran out behind me as I was putting on my shoes. She pressed something into my palm, a little folded paper crane. "So you don't forget me," she whispered. "I never could," I said, hugging her. She smelled like vanilla and crayons. Justin walked me to the door but didn't hug me goodbye. Lauren waved from the dining room without looking up from her phone. Driving home, I felt strangely clear, not hurt. I'd moved past hurt long ago, just aware. It was like someone had finally turned on the light in a room I'd been stumbling through for years. I saw everything for what it was. The politeness that wasn't kindness. The requests that weren't love. The inclusion that was really pity. When I got home, Harold was sitting in his chair, reading the newspaper. He looked up and smiled. "Good dinner?" I set down my purse and kissed his forehead. "Eye-opening," I said. He folded the paper, studying me. "You're done, aren't you?" "Almost," I said, and he smiled, like he'd been waiting for that answer for a long time. Grief is strange. It doesn't come when you expect it, and it doesn't arrive all at once. You think it'll hit the day of the funeral, or in the empty bedroom, or when you reach for a toothbrush that isn't yours. But real grief sneaks in through quiet moments. Like when you find his shoes exactly where he left them and realize you'll never move them. I spent a whole morning sitting in Harold's chair. It still held his shape. There were notes in the drawer of the side table. Grocery lists. Reminders scribbled in his slanted, impatient handwriting. Pick up eggs. Fix porch light. Tell Agatha I love her. That last one made me fold the paper and hold it against my chest. It had been nearly a year since he passed. Long enough for the condolences to dry up, for the casseroles to stop coming, for people to start using phrases like moving on. I hadn't moved. I'd stayed right here, in the house we'd built, breathing in all the spaces he used to fill. But now I was starting to feel something else, not just grief, not just sorrow. Something like resolve. Because I wasn't just mourning Harold anymore. I was mourning the fantasy of family I'd clung to long after it had crumbled. After that final dinner, and after the funeral, I stopped calling, stopped offering, stopped giving, not to punish, to preserve. Myself, mostly. I'd given so much over the years, time, money, emotion, and asked for so little that they had forgotten I could ask for anything at all. They had mistaken my love for weakness, my silence for permission. But Harold would have never allowed it. "You're not made to be small," he once told me. "You were meant to take up space." I hadn't felt like I'd taken up space in years, so I started reclaiming it, slowly. First, I canceled the monthly wire transfers Justin never acknowledged. Then I closed the joint line of credit they'd once convinced me to co-sign, just in case. The bank clerk looked surprised but didn't question me. When she asked for a reason, I said, "Recentering priorities." It sounded very modern. She smiled and nodded. I began clearing out the guest room, the one I'd always kept ready for visits that never came. I boxed up toys the children had long outgrown, folded extra linens, and opened the windows wide. That room would become something else now, not a shrine to people who didn't care to visit. Maybe a sewing room again, maybe just a space for myself. And I went through the attic. For the first time in years. Harold's boxes, of course, his college books, his fishing rods, his watch collection, but also old photo albums, letters I'd written but never sent, receipts from every major family holiday we ever paid for. A box labeled Justin Summer Camp 1989 contained every postcard he'd ever sent me. Miss you, Mom. Camp food is gross. Love, Justin. I sat on the floor holding those cards, trying to reconcile the boy who wrote them with the man who now saw me as disposable. Maybe he'd always been heading that way. Or maybe the distance didn't start in him. Maybe it started in me, with every choice I made to keep the peace, to make it easy for him to grow up without responsibility. I let him believe love came with no cost. I let them all believe that. But love does have a cost. It should. Not in dollars, in attention, in presence, in the willingness to carry weight when the other person is tired. I thought of Nora again, of her softness, her steadiness, of how she never asked for anything but always showed up. Her kind of love was effortless, not because it cost nothing, but because she gave it freely. I picked up the phone and dialed Marcus. "I'm ready," I said. "For what?" he asked. "To stop pretending," I said. "To stop allowing." "All right," he said, without hesitation. "Come in tomorrow. We'll finish it." After I hung up, I went to the closet and pulled out the black coat I hadn't worn since Harold's funeral. Not because I planned to wear it again, but because I needed to touch it one last time. I ran my fingers along the lapel, then folded it neatly and placed it in the donation pile. Some griefs you carry, some you release. That night, I sat by the fireplace and lit a small candle. Not for Harold. I didn't need a flame to remember him. I lit it for the woman I used to be. The one who gave everything and asked for nothing. Who let herself be erased. And then I blew it out. Tomorrow, I would walk into Marcus's office and finalize a new will. Tomorrow, I would call the bank and transfer assets into Nora's name. Tomorrow, I would stop waiting to be invited and start choosing where I belonged. Tomorrow, I would no longer be the woman who begged to be seen. Tomorrow, I would be the one looking forward, with both eyes open. Marcus's office was exactly as I remembered it, cluttered in a charming, unbothered way, with too many books and not enough places to put them. He hadn't changed his rug since the 90s. It still had that faded maroon pattern with a coffee stain by the window. I liked that about him. Some things stayed the same on purpose. "Agatha," he said, standing when I entered. "You look well." "I look determined," I replied. "That's close enough." He offered a wry smile and gestured toward the chair across from his desk. I sat, smoothing my skirt. My hands were steady. That surprised me. I thought they might shake. "Everything's ready," he said, tapping the folder in front of him. "New will, transfer of trust assets, beneficiary updates. I've added a revocation clause so the previous will is voided entirely. And I followed your request to remove all mention of Justin and his children." "Good," I said. "And the trust?" "Filed in Nora's name. Irrevocable, as we discussed. She'll have access to the interest now, the principal, when she turns 30. You've built enough to take care of her well into her future." I nodded. That's all I wanted. Marcus adjusted his glasses and looked at me for a long moment. "You're not the first parent to come in here feeling disappointed," he said carefully. "But you're the first who isn't doing it out of spite." "This isn't revenge," I said. "It's clarity. I've spent decades giving without conditions. Now I'm giving where it's deserved." He slid the documents toward me, one by one. Initial here and here. This page confirms the transfer of the lake cabin to the trust. I hesitated on that one. Harold loved that cabin. He used to sit on the dock in the evenings with a cigar and a paperback mystery, feet dangling just over the edge. I thought of Nora, barefoot, fishing rod in hand, asking me what kind of birds made the haunting call in the trees. Loons, I told her. They sound lonely, but they're not. I signed the page. Once it was all done, Marcus folded his hands. You're certain about this? I am. Do you want me to notify Justin? No, I said. Let him feel the silence for once. He didn't argue, just nodded. I stood, gathering my things. Agatha, he said as I reached the door. I turned. You did the right thing, he said. Even if it doesn't feel like it yet. It feels fine, I said. It feels like breathing after holding it in for too long. Outside, the air was cool and sharp, and the sky was a soft, steady gray, the kind of day that doesn't demand anything from you. I walked 2 blocks to the bank. Inside, the woman at the reception desk recognized me. Mrs. Hemsley, right on time. I met with the branch manager, a kind, round man named Alan, who wore sweaters even in June. We went over the transfers. Several accounts consolidated, 2 closed, 1 new trust account opened under Nora's name. All the automatic payments tied to Justin's household were canceled. Credit authorizations revoked. Co-signature privileges removed. Alan looked a little nervous by the end. This is a significant change. I just want to make sure you're comfortable. I'm not just comfortable, I said. I'm finally acting like someone who knows her worth. He smiled at that. Before I left, I asked him to print a balance summary. I wanted to see it. All of it. In plain numbers. Proof that what Harold and I built, quietly, steadily, over decades, hadn't been wasted. That it was still ours to give meaning to. As I folded the paper into my purse, I felt a stillness settle in my chest. Not sorrow, not relief, just stillness. The kind that comes after you set something heavy down and realize you don't have to carry it anymore. That evening, I called Nora. Hey, Grandma, she answered, breathless. I was just about to call you. I got your muffins. They were magic. I didn't make any muffins, sweetheart. A pause. Then who? She laughed. Wait. Did you send something else? Not yet, I said. But I did something for you today. Something that won't fit in a box. Should I be worried? Not even a little, I said. But maybe hopeful. She was quiet for a moment. You okay, Grandma? I am now. She didn't ask more. That's what I love about her. She lets silence speak when it needs to. We chatted a bit longer. Nothing big, just the weather and her new favorite author. And then we said goodnight. After I hung up, I sat in Harold's chair again. This time, it felt like mine. And for the first time in a long, long while, I didn't feel like I owed anyone a single thing. The lake cabin was always meant to be temporary. A little wooden structure Harold built with his brother in the 70s, back when vacations meant packing sandwiches and swatting mosquitoes. It had no insulation, no TV, no dishwasher. The furniture was mismatched. The floor creaked like it had secrets. But I loved it. And more importantly, so did Harold. We used to spend whole weekends there with no plans. He'd fish. I'd read. Sometimes we'd play Scrabble and argue about whether made-up words should count. There was no signal, no schedule. Just us. After he died, I avoided the place. Too many echoes. But now, with the trust finalized and the deed transferred, I needed to go back. Not to mourn, but to release it. To pass it along, like a baton handed from one set of steady hands to the next. I called Nora. Want to take a drive this weekend? To the cabin? She asked. Yes, I said. It's time. We left early Saturday. She brought snacks and a playlist that somehow included both James Taylor and something called indie folk electronica, which I didn't understand but found strangely calming. We didn't talk much at first. The road stretched out ahead of us, and the silence was companionable. When we pulled up the gravel driveway, the trees opened like old friends. It's smaller than I remembered, Nora said, stepping out of the car. Most things are, I replied. We walked the perimeter first. The garden beds were overrun with weeds, but the rosemary was still alive, stubborn as ever. The shutters hung slightly crooked, but the porch swing held. Harold had reinforced it after Justin broke it jumping off as a boy. Inside, everything smelled like cedar and thyme. Nora ran her fingers along the bookshelves, picked up an old chessboard, found the tin where Harold kept matches and odd coins. It feels real, she said, like it remembers you. It remembers all of us, I said, even the parts we forgot. We spent the day airing things out, sweeping floors, brushing cobwebs off windows. Nora found Harold's old fishing rod, dusted it carefully. He used to let me hold this, she said, even when I tangled the line. He never minded. I showed her where the septic fuse box was, how to reset the heater, where the emergency key was hidden in the old owl statue. She took notes in a little spiral notebook, even drew a tiny map. In the afternoon, we sat on the porch with coffee and watched the light shift across the lake. The water was still, mirror-like. It always calmed me, that lake. Not because it was dramatic or grand, but because it stayed. Season after season it held. I turned to her. It's yours now. She blinked. What? The cabin. I signed it over. She stared at me. Wait, you mean it's in your trust? Official. Legal. Done. Grandma. Her voice broke. Why? Because you understand what this place is, and because you never asked for anything. She wiped her cheek and smiled. Then I guess I should say thank you. You just did. We stayed until dusk, locking up as the crickets began their chorus. Before we left, she took one last look at the porch. I think I want to paint it, she said. Same color, just fresh. Good, I said. Don't let it rot just because it's old. That night back home, I opened my inbox. Justin had emailed me. Subject line, urgent request. I stared at it for a while before clicking. Inside was a long explanation about how their mortgage rate had jumped unexpectedly, how Lauren's firm was behind on client payments, how they were facing temporary liquidity strain. He ended with, "Would you be willing to co-sign a short-term loan? Just for a few months. We'd pay it off quickly. We just need a little help." I read it twice, and then a third time. Then I hit delete. No reply. No explanation. Just silence. Because some things, once broken, are better left untouched. And because I had already given everything I ever would. I looked out the window. The world outside was quiet. Inside, I felt a peace that came not from what I'd built, but from what I'd finally stopped carrying. He didn't wait long. The day after I deleted the email, Justin called. I recognized the ringtone immediately. A sound that used to bring comfort, but now felt like a warning. I let it ring once, twice, 3 times. Then I picked up. "Hi, Mom," he said. His voice was light, practiced. "Got a second?" "I do." "Great. Just wanted to follow up on the note I sent yesterday. I wasn't sure if it landed. You know how spam filters are." It landed. A beat of silence. Then, "Okay. Good. So, what do you think?" I didn't answer right away. I let the quiet stretch, not to punish, but to make space for truth, something long absent from our conversations. I think, I said finally, that I've done enough. Another pause. But this one bristled. What does that mean? It means no, Justin. His voice tightened. No to the cosign, or no to any of it. The cosign, the stopgap loans, the silent funding of your lifestyle. No to pretending this is what love looks like. He laughed, short, sharp. Wow, that's harsh. No, it's honest. You've called me harsh when I didn't smile on command, when I asked questions you didn't like. But this is me drawing a line. So you're just going to let us flounder? You're not floundering, I said calmly. You're uncomfortable. That's different. He exhaled, a long theatrical breath. This isn't like you. No, I said. It's not like the me you trained to say yes. That version's gone. Silence again. Then came the shift. I could hear it happen. The friendliness faded, replaced by something colder. Lauren said this might happen, he said. That grief does strange things to people. I almost smiled. Grief doesn't make you see things. It removes what kept you from seeing them. His voice hardened. So, this is about the money, about inheritance. You're cutting us out. You cut yourselves out, I said. I'm just finishing what you started. I heard him swallow. After everything we've done for you. That's when I laughed. Not cruelly, not loudly, just one soft, breathy sound. Everything you've done for me? He didn't answer. Justin, I said, you don't get to rewrite history just because you don't like the ending. You've spent years managing me, making me smaller, quieter, more useful, and I let you, but it ends now. More silence. Then, you'll regret this. No, I said gently. You will. And I hung up. He didn't call back, but Lauren did. 2 hours later. Voicemail. Her voice was sharp, polished as ever. Agatha, this is Lauren. I just wanted to make sure you're clear on what your decision means. You're jeopardizing your son's stability, your grandchildren's futures, your relationship with this family. I hope you understand the gravity of that. I deleted it. No need to carry things that already proved they weren't mine to hold. That night, I made dinner for one. Something warm. Something slow. I lit a candle, not for ceremony, but for light. I ate in silence and found it tasted better than years of swallowed pride. After the dishes were done, I opened the old album from the living room shelf, the one with the cracked leather cover. I flipped past the early photos. Wedding, apartment, baby Justin. I stopped at a photo of Harold holding Nora on the porch of the lake cabin. He's smiling at her like she's the only thing that matters in the world. She's holding a pine cone, staring at it like it contains magic. That's what love looked like. Not invoices, not guilt, not obligation dressed up as family, just attention and care and presence. I closed the book and set it gently on the table. The silence in the house wasn't heavy anymore. It wasn't loneliness, it was space. Space for the right things to grow and for the wrong things to leave quietly, as they should. Weeks passed. No more calls, no emails, no knocks at the door. Justin had gone silent. Not in the way a child pulls back in sorrow, but in the way someone turns their back once they've realized they can't win. I thought there might be another voicemail from Lauren, maybe one from one of the older grandchildren, something rehearsed and brittle. But there was nothing, and to my surprise, I didn't miss it. Life had taken on a new rhythm, not easier, just clearer. I woke early, always have. The world is softer at 5 a.m. I made tea, Opened the windows, let the chill come in. I read more, walked more, cooked, not because anyone was coming over, but because I enjoyed it again. And I started donating things. Quietly. Pieces of a life too long, defined by waiting. Old clothes, unused china, a full drawer of linen napkins I'd once imagined unfolding at some large, imagined family dinner that never quite came. I kept Harold's things. Not all of them, but enough. His pipe, his reading glasses, his worn copy of The Old Man and the Sea with the margin notes he never stopped making. That copy went into my nightstand drawer under a lavender sachet and my grandmother's rosary. One afternoon, Nora called. "You sound different," she said. "How do you mean?" "Lighter, like you're not waiting for anything anymore." I paused, then smiled. "I'm not." We made plans for Sunday. She brought over a pie, too much cinnamon, but I said nothing, and a photo album she'd found while going through her mother's things. "Thought you'd want this," she said, placing it on the table. Mom wrote captions in the back. Claire's handwriting hit me like a soft blow, loopy, dramatic, full of little hearts over the eyes. I ran my fingers over her words. The ache never goes, but it changes, becomes less sharp, more sacred. We sat together on the couch, flipping through pages. Nora rested her head on my shoulder like she used to when she was small. "You know," she said softly, "I don't think I ever said it clearly, but I'm proud to come from you." That did something to me. Not because it was sweet, but because it was true. Hers to say. Freely. "I'm proud to leave something to you," I said. "Not just things. Something real." She nodded. "I want to take care of it. The cabin. The memories. You. I know you will." When she left that evening, I stood by the window and watched her drive off. The porch light flickered once, then held steady. A few days later, I received a letter in the mail. No return address. Justin's handwriting on the envelope. I sat with it for an hour before opening. Inside, a short note. "Mother, I won't pretend to understand your choices, but I hope you understand the consequences. You've cut off more than money. You've cut off your family. If that was your goal, congratulations. Justin, no, love. No, take care. Just that." I folded the letter once, twice, then placed it in the drawer where I used to keep bank statements. Not out of sentiment, out of finality. I didn't need to respond. Some letters are only meant to be received. That evening, I sat on the porch with a blanket and watched the sun settle behind the trees. The roses had bloomed again, stubborn, lovely things. I thought of Harold's voice reading to me on nights I couldn't sleep, of Nora's hands, steady on the steering wheel, of Claire's scribbled notes and Nora's cinnamon-heavy pie. These were the things I'd kept, and the things I would leave behind. Not out of bitterness, but as an act of deep, deliberate love. Love with boundaries. Love that does not apologize for saying, "This is where I end, and you do not get to enter just because you used to belong." I rocked slowly in the chair Harold had built, the wood creaking beneath me like an old friend whispering, "You're still here." Yes, I was, and for once, that was enough. It was a Thursday when the package arrived. Brown paper, no return address, Nora's handwriting unmistakable. Inside, a hardcover journal bound in green linen. On the first page, a single line written in pen. "I want your story, Grandma. Not just what happened, who you were through it." Below that, she had left every page blank. I held the journal in my lap for a long time. There was no deadline, no pressure. just an invitation, a space. And that, I realized, was what I'd been longing for all these years. Not to be praised, not to be rescued, just to be listened to. That evening, I sharpened a pencil, not a pen, because it felt less permanent, more forgiving. I began to write. Not a timeline, not a memoir, just little pieces, memories I hadn't touched in decades. The first dress I ever sewed, the way Harold used to hum before speaking, the strange joy of folding sheets still warm from the dryer, the sound of Claire's laughter when she couldn't stop, the way Nora once fell asleep on my chest during a thunderstorm, her tiny hand gripping my blouse like she was afraid I'd disappear. I wrote until my hand cramped. I wrote until the tea beside me went cold. And when I stopped, I didn't feel tired. I felt whole. Nora called 2 days later. "I didn't want to make you feel obligated," she said quickly. "I just thought, you did exactly right," I said. "You gave me something to fill that wasn't already broken." She didn't speak for a second. Then, "I'm glad." She told me she had been offered a full scholarship for a graduate program. Creative writing, of all things. "It's not practical," she said, "but it feels right. You have one life," I told her. "Don't waste it on what makes you small." She hesitated. "Mom used to say that to me." "I know," I said. "She got it from me." There was something healing about hearing Claire in her daughter. The phrasing, the thoughtfulness, even the doubt. It was all there, just gentler now. Nora said she'd be taking the first semester remotely, so she could keep visiting. I told her I didn't need visits to know she loved me. She said, "I know, but I want to come anyway." That Sunday, she brought over groceries. Not because I needed them, because she had memorized what I liked. Good bread. Apricots. The brand of tea Harold always drank. The one they stopped selling at most stores. She helped me organize the pantry. We found a jar of honey that had expired in 2012 and laughed until we cried. Not loudly, just the kind of laughter that leaks out like steam from a kettle, slow and soft and warm. When she left, she kissed my hand. Not out of pity, out of something older than that. Respect. That night, I pulled out the journal again, wrote about the first time I ever saw snow, about the dress I wore the day Harold proposed, about the sound Justin made the first time he said, "Mama." I wrote it all, the good and the ache and the wonder, not to rewrite anything, just to remember, and maybe to be remembered. I didn't need forgiveness anymore, not from Justin, not even from myself. I had made mistakes, yes, but none so large as letting someone keep using the word family like a hook instead of a home. Now I was free of that. Now I had Nora. Now I had a legacy being built not in wills or accounts or deeds, but in pages, in stories, in the way she looked at me like I still had something to give. Because I did. And I would. As long as breath lived in me, keep giving it. Not my savings. Myself. It was late autumn when I saw Justin again. Not by choice. I was leaving the pharmacy, prescriptions in one bag, cough drops in another, when I heard my name. Not Mom. Not Mother. Just Agatha, called out like it belonged to a stranger. I turned. He was standing by his car, hands in his coat pockets, alone. "Can we talk?" he asked. His face was drawn, less sure of itself. The confident tilt of his jaw had given way to something closer to irritation than grief. Not sadness, frustration, as though my silence had become the bigger sin. I nodded once. Briefly. We sat on the bench outside the shop, the wind tugging at the corners of my coat. I waited for him to speak first. "I don't understand," he began. "How you can just erase us like that." "You were gone long before I was," I said. "You just never noticed." He bristled. "That's not true." "It is," I said gently. "And deep down, you know it." He stared out at the parking lot. "I made mistakes. We all did. But families move on." "I did move on," I said. "That's the part you can't stomach, that I didn't stay at the station waiting for the apology train that was never going to arrive." He shook his head. "You think you're the only one who's hurt? We've struggled. The kids don't understand why you've shut them out." I turned slightly to face him. "You mean they don't understand why the ATM stopped dispensing?" "That's not fair," he said, but there was no heat behind it. "No," I replied. "It's accurate." He looked at me for a long time then. I wondered what he saw. An old woman? A traitor? A closed door? "I came today because I heard about Nora," he said. "The trust. The cabin." So that was it. Not concern, not curiosity. Just confirmation. He'd found out. "I'm glad," I said. "She deserves it." "She's a child." "She's 25, I corrected, "and she shows up." He was silent. I stood, brushing crumbs from my coat. "I'm not angry anymore, Justin. I'm not bitter. I'm simply done. There's a difference." "So that's it? No way back?" I softened, not because he deserved it, but because I did. "There's always a way back. But it starts with honesty and humility and the understanding that what you took from me wasn't money. It was the belief that I mattered to you beyond what I could give." He didn't respond, didn't stand. When I walked away, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt clean. Some goodbyes aren't loud. They're just final. That evening, Nora called. I told her about the run-in, the bench, the quiet. "You okay?" she asked. "I'm better than okay," I said. "I'm free." She was quiet a moment. "You know, I submitted a short story for workshop." "About?" "You." My heart did something soft and strange. "Is that so?" "It's called The Woman Who Stayed Standing." I didn't speak. I couldn't. "You're not erased," she said. "You're being written down." And in that moment I knew it was true. Not because of the cabin or the trust or the legacy I'd redirected, but because in Nora, something of me would keep walking forward, eyes wide open, voice steady, feet planted. And that was enough. Not revenge, not restoration, just the quiet certainty that I had finally stopped living at the mercy of people who mistook my kindness for compliance. I looked around my home, the books, the candlelight. The window cracked just enough to let the breeze whisper through. This was my life now, not waiting, not mourning, not financing other people's dreams while mine withered, but standing. And that would be my final answer. People talk about freedom like it's a loud thing, like it's wind in your hair on some highway, or standing on a mountaintop shouting your truth. Maybe for some it is. But for me, freedom is waking up without dread. It's eating a peach at the kitchen table in silence and not having to explain yourself. It's checking the mailbox and not hoping for anything. It's reading the same page of a book 3 times because you're not trying to escape anymore. You're just enjoying the way the words sit beside you. It's knowing, finally, that being alone is not the same as being abandoned. After that last conversation with Justin, the world didn't shift dramatically. No doors slammed, no letters arrived, no public reckonings. Just a quiet absence. And in that absence, something new grew. Not a fresh version of the old life, but something entirely my own. Nora visited weekly, sometimes with groceries, sometimes with nothing but a poem she wanted to read aloud. We'd sit on the porch, two women, one older, one becoming, and we'd talk like equals. She never rushed me, never reached for her phone. She asked questions that required real answers, and when I answered, she listened with her eyes. Once I asked her why she kept coming back. "You're the only place I feel like I don't have to perform," she said. "With you, I don't have to be impressive. I just have to be real." It startled me, that word. Place. I had become that. A place. Solid. Known. Returnable. Harold would have loved that. One afternoon, we went to the lake cabin. Autumn had left her handprints on every tree, gold and rust and quiet surrender. Nora made tea on the stove while I watched her from the rocking chair Harold had once sanded smooth. "I want to get married here," she said suddenly, not looking up from the mugs. "Someday. No tuxedos, no catering, just the people who matter." I didn't speak right away. I was afraid my voice might crack. "You'll have it," I said. "It's yours." She turned, smiling. "I know." Later that week, I found myself walking through my garden, Harold's garden, really, and it struck me how long I had stopped noticing the things I loved. The hydrangeas were still stubbornly blooming. The rosemary I once thought dead had returned. Even the soil, so dry through summer, had softened with the rain. Things come back sometimes. Not always, but sometimes. I sat on the back step and listened to the wind rustling the branches. No music, no noise, just breath and leaves and time. And I realized something. I didn't need an ending that proved anything. I didn't need Justin to understand. I didn't need Lauren to approve. I didn't need the older grandchildren, who barely knew me, to rewrite me in their stories. Because I had chosen peace, and that choice, once made room for better things. In the months that followed, I started sharing more of my journals with Nora. She read them slowly, reverently, sometimes crying without hiding it. One night, she asked if she could publish parts of it someday. I said yes. "Even the hard parts?" she asked. "Especially those." Because this isn't a story about revenge. It's not even about grief. It's about clarity. About stepping out of the role you were assigned and finally speaking in your own voice. And that's what I want for anyone reading this. Maybe you're someone who's been used for too long. Maybe you've been told that family means unconditional giving, no matter the toll. Maybe you've swallowed your voice, made yourself small, told yourself that this is just the way it is. But it doesn't have to be. You don't have to be loud to take up space. You don't have to fight to be free. You just have to stop pretending you're okay with being unseen. That's the first step. And if this story meant something to you, if it made you pause, or breathe deeper, or remember that you're still here, then let me ask you one thing. Share it. Not for me, for the others like me. The quiet ones, the tired ones, the kind ones who've been taken for granted. Let them know they're not alone. Let them know it's not too late. Let them know we're still here, and we are standing. Now and always.